Okay, per the issues that we're having with Loom, I'm searching for a new screen sharing program so that I can record videos and still be able to share my screen. In the meantime, I don't have any physical copies of Studies Weekly. I'm going to look into getting some so that maybe I can use my document camera. But yeah, my document camera, so that I can just display the article and read it aloud. In the meantime, if I'll take some pictures of the article and post it so that you can read along, or you can log into Studies Weekly with your Clever account. So you'll go to quinlanisd.net. You'll hover over the links tab, and it should be the first or one of the top selections is Clever. You'll log into Clever using Google, and then you can select Studies Weekly from there to get in and see all of the articles. We are currently on week 6, Prehistoric Indians, and we're reading the first article and the second article. So if you need to pause the video, run back through the instructions so that you can get to Studies Weekly correctly, play, pause with the instructions, please go for it. But I will go ahead and begin reading the article. We are always coming across new words that Ms. Rice is not super familiar with. The Coahuiltecan, the Coahuiltecan, real survivors. The bands of nomads called Coahuiltecan often fought against each other. I'm really not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm sorry if I am not. Perhaps that is because the land between San Antonio and Brownsville was a difficult place to live. Food was hard to find. Ground mesquite beans made up most of their diet. My dad uses mesquite beans when he is grilling. He puts them at the bottom of the grill for a nice smoky flavor. But it looks like they were eating the mesquite beans. They come from mesquite trees. Go figure. One of their favorite foods was made by mixing mesquite flour, dirt, and water in a hole. If the mix didn't taste right, they threw in more dirt. Sometimes they ate pecans, tuna, the fruit of the prickly pear cactus, and the powdered bones of fish and snakes. A very interesting diet these guys had. If these foods weren't available, they ate spiders, grubs, ant eggs, and even deer dung. Wow, they really were tough. Wow. Women did most of the gathering. When a hunter killed a deer, the women had to bring it back to camp. Women also told the men when to go to war. They gathered around a fire to complain about their enemy. If they complained enough, the men would get their weapons and prepare for battle. The Coahuiltecan were amazingly strong. If a hunter saw a deer and couldn't kill it, he could run after it for a whole day. Sometimes hunters made special deer traps. That is one pretty incredible thing about the human body is our endurance. We can outrun, as humans, pretty much every animal. Pretty much every animal. We might not be faster than them, but our endurance is so incredible that we can run them until they're exhausted and they give up. So the hunters back in the day sometimes would just run and chase something until it was too tired to run anymore. And then they would have their catch. Sometimes hunters made special deer traps. They built a barrier of brush. Sharpened stakes were driven into the ground behind the brush. When a deer came by, they chased it toward the brush. When it jumped over the brush, it landed on the stakes and died. Oh, that's horrible. Coahuiltecan Indians along the coast also killed deer by spreading out and forcing the deer into the Gulf, where they drowned. I guess if you're hungry, you're gonna do what you need to do to get some food. The Coahuiltecan lived in huts. Early Europeans said their camps were nasty and smelly, with garbage thrown all around. Maybe they were just too busy surviving to have time.
Good morning, Butler, and happy.
They always do announcements while I'm trying to read, and now I've lost my place. Maybe they were just too busy surviving to have time for cleaning, especially if they were planning to move soon. Most historians believe that the Coahuiltecan were slowly absorbed into other cultures. So I suppose they moved around and kind of mingled with other cultures. Moving on to the next article, titled The End of Prehistoric Texas. We've covered a lot of time, thousands of years so far, in Texas Studies Weekly these past few weeks, haven't we? You've learned that during the last ice age, Paleo-Americans hunted giant beasts like the mammoth. You know that when the ice age ended, the climate warmed. The land we call Texas changed. As the giant beasts became extinct, people had to change the way they lived. Last week, you studied the archaic Indians of the Lower Pecos. You read about many artifacts that were preserved in the desert. This week's adventure takes place during the late prehistoric time in Texas history. We know more about the late prehistoric Indians in Texas than we do about the Paleo-Americans and archaic Indians. Usually we're going to know much more about a period of history that is closer to the present than further away. There's typically more artifacts that have survived because it's not as old, right? So we can ascertain more information about that time period. We know more about the late prehistoric Indians in Texas than we do about the Paleo-Americans and archaic Indians. They were the people who greeted the first European explorers. Some explorers, like Cabeza de Vaca and La Salle, wrote about them in journals. So that's another reason why we know so much, is because, well, there's writing during this time, and there's those are really informational artifacts to find is actual like writing about a culture. You're going to learn a lot when you see things in writing, like journals and diaries from people who were actually there, right? Rather than just looking at like the cups and pots and things that they built, we have writing from them. Big changes were taking place in Texas during the late prehistoric time. About 1,500 years ago, an amazing new invention found its way into Texas: the bow and arrow. This new weapon was just as powerful, easier to use, and more accurate than the atlatl. Other changes took place when a large group of American Indians, known as the Mississippian culture, spread out through much of the eastern part of North America. Some of them came to East Texas and became known as the Caddo. You guys have probably heard of Caddo Mills, right? In Caddo, Texas. That's in East Texas, kind of like where we are, right? They were farmers and mound builders. Texas got its name from the Caddo word Teishas, which means allies or friends. You'll learn more about them inside. A group of American Indians with a terrible reputation lived along the Gulf Coast of Texas. These were the Karankawa Indians with a terrible reputation. Ooh, I wonder what they did. Many people believed they were cannibals, but was this true? If you don't know what a cannibal is someone who will eat another person. We don't eat people. That's kind of a rule of being human. but there have been people in the past who have eaten other people. You'll find out this in this week's paper. In South Texas, groups of American Indians known as the Coahuiltecan lived in the toughest conditions of all. Coahuiltecan is really the name of a language, not a tribe. But we use that word when we talk about the American Indians living in South Texas. The Coahuiltecan had fewer resources than any other American Indians in Texas. How they survived is a story you will not want to miss. Finally, we will learn about the Jornada Mogollon and the... Is that Mogollon? Is this a Spanish word? And the Jumano or Humano? I don't know. It depends on if I'm reading it like it's a Spanish word or if it's an English word. The Jordana or Jordana, I don't know. Were a Puebloan. Okay, so this seems like it's Spanish. Okay, the Jordana were a Puebloan culture in West Texas. Remember reading about the rock art of the archaic last week? The Jordana painted amazing rock art too. The Humano were more of a mystery. Archaeologists are struggling to learn about this lost culture. Turn the page. There's more to learn. We'll turn the page tomorrow.